네, 안녕하세요. 호암미술관에서 열리는 니콜라스 파티 아티스트 토크에 참여해 주시고 그리고 라이브 스트리밍으로 지금 시청해 주시는 모든 분들께 진심으로 감사를 드립니다. 저는 전시를 기획한 리움미술관의 전시기획실장 곽준영이고 여기는 지금 이 전시의 주인공인 니콜라스 파티입니다. 작가와 전시에 대해서 얘기하고 싶은 것들이 많은 데다가 저희 둘 다 사실 말이 많은 거를 제가 너무나 잘 알고 있기 때문에 좀 속도를 내서 되도록 많은 얘기를 해볼 수 있도록 진행을 해보도록 하겠습니다. 먼저 이번 전시에 대해서 간단히 말씀을 드리면 이 전시가 한국에서 첫 번째 열리는 전시일 뿐만 아니라 사실 호암미술관에서 열리는 첫 동시대 작가 전시이고요. 82년 개관한 이후에. 그리고 사실 작가로 따지면 작가의 거의 작품 전반을 아우르는 여태까지 규모 중에 가장 큰 서베이 전시이기도 합니다. 그래서 여러분들은 가장 많은 작가의 작품을 볼 수 있는 그런 기회이고요. 기존 작품 회화 조각이 48점, 그리고 신작 페인팅으로 나온 게 20점, 그리고 작가가 여기에 한 달 동안 사실은 지금까지로 따지면 6주인데요. 머물면서 특별히 제작한 벽화 5점, 그리고 리움의 고미술 소장품까지 포함해서 같이 총체적으로 전시를 합니다. 그리고 이번 전시에 대해서 얘기를 먼저 하면 좋겠지만 아무래도 이번 전시가 작가를 한국에 처음 소개하는 전시인 만큼 작가님의 과거의 이력들을 좀 같이 얘기를 나눠보고 싶어요. 그 이유는 작가 작품이 그냥 회화뿐 아니라 뭐 채색 조각, 총체적인 설치, 큐레이팅까지 아주 크게 아우르고 있는데 그런 활동에 대한 그러니까 힌트를 얻을 수 있는 게 과거의 이력들에서 나오거든요. 그래서 그런 부분을 좀 짚어보면 좋을 것 같습니다. 사실 이 작가가 로잔 근처의 작은 마을에서 났고 풍경이 너무 아름다운 와이너리에서 자랐습니다. 그리고 어렸을 때부터 그림을 그렸고 그래피티 활동을 한 10년간 했어요. Can you talk a little bit about graffiti and your experience? 네.
Yes. Hello everybody. I'm very pleased to be here and talk to you in live here and also on the live stream. It's very exciting. It's the first day that the show is open, and we've been working on it for a long time. So I'm very excited to share that with the audience here. So yeah, like you were asking about my graffiti kind of time. So I mean, I've been always like painting and drawing since I was very young. But when I was around 12 or 12 years old. In '92, I think there was the, second wave in Europe of street art at that point after the '80s, and I guess I embraced it from an early age, and it was an amazing way of combining, fun teenager activities and my kind of love for art. So we will spend a lot of time, outdoor at night, doing different chasing with authorities sometimes to do not too bad things, just a little graffiti here and there. But all this decade of graffiti really kind of had a big impact in my later career in art, because obviously I kept this love and this passion to do murals and to actually work upon the ephemerality of the work that we have here that will disappear after the show. In street arts, it's really embedded in the form, because, for example, if you paint on a train, sometimes the graffiti is actually erased, washed the next morning. So it's really more performative thing than anything else. Also, visually, it's not that interesting. So this part of my practice really come from there. This kind of performative and ephemeral and large scales kind of is very important to me.
그런 점에서 사실은 큰 작업에 두려움이 하나도 없어요. 정말 빨리 그리고 그런 에너지가 어마어마한 작가라서 벽화 그리기를 정말 즐겁게 즐기면서 하는 작가라는 생각이 들거든요. 그리고 그 다음에 이 작가가 그 로잔에 있는 예술대학교에 갔는데요. 에칼에 갔는데 거기서는 또 전공이 영화, 그래픽 디자인 그리고 심지어 3D 애니메이션을 만들고 그룹 활동을 했어요. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so then I had to stop doing graffiti at some point and go to school. And somehow, I know, I ended up like in the first year in studying movies and making little movies. And then somehow I switched into like this, it was in early 2000, 2001, I guess. And so like there was this department called New Media, which was basically like computer design, or it was kind of, I guess, fairly newish at that point. It was to become like, I guess, like internet designers and stuff like that. And I was not really interested in that part, but I loved like, I guess, animation. And there was like, at that point, it was a very big moment for MTV and, you know, music videos. And they were all like, you know, Michel Gondry and, you know, Spike Jonze, all those people that were doing those great kind of anime kind of little clips, Bjork and all that stuff. And I think that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to kind of do like little movies for big stars. Didn't make it, I guess, but so yeah, I kind of started to be really into the 3D animation, but very low skill because I was not really patient to learn the computer that much, and I was still drawing a lot at the end of the day. But this 3D kind of years really kind of influenced my my kind of work afterwards, because like the artificiality of 3D and this kind of digital feeling is really kind of embedded in my work, and especially I think in the first pots that I did and the portraits, they kind of really have this kind of digital, artificial look, and it's really, I think it's really come from that moment that I was looking at really, you know, daily, like those kind of digital images, and really kind of being embedded in it.
저는 이 작품에서도 그걸 느낍니다. 약간 복붙한 느낌이 나면서 이렇게 커피 페이스트한 느낌도 나고 그런 디지털 렌더링적인 느낌이 많은 부분에서 발견이 되실 수 있을 것 같아요. 그리고 나서 작가가 이제 글라스고 예술대학에 가면서 회화를 좀 더 본격적으로 하기 시작했는데요. 처음에 풍경, 정물 그리고 초상 순으로 이제 그림을 그리기 시작했습니다. 그 부분에 대해서 왜 그런 선택을 하게 됐는지, 그리고 제가 또 궁금한 거는 이번 전시 작품을 이해하고 전시를 이해하기 위한 굉장히 틀이 되는 요소인데요. 이 작가가 거의 그 미술사를, 그게 고대부터 근현대를 아우르는 모든 미술사의 다양한 요소들, 그냥 작가뿐 아니라 뭐 재료, 양식, 모티브 여러 가지를 다 샘플링해서 작업을 만들고, 또 그게 사실은 이렇게 다양한 컬렉션을 연구하고 또 모티브를 받고 이런 데 영향을 주고 있거든요. 그런 방식의 작업을 시작하게 된 계기, 특별히 전통적인 회화 장르를 택해서 그런 방식으로 작품을 만들고 전시를 만들게 된 그런 계기에 대해서 좀 들어봤으면 좋겠습니다. 네.
Yes, so it's yeah. I think you kind of, we were talking about 3D, and then then I went on to Glasgow School of Arts, and basically, as soon as I was in Glasgow, I think I decided to really focus on painting, and I kind of slowly, really kind of my kind of work into movies and digital kind of imagery was kind of, I guess, dying out a little bit. Even if I still use a lot the computer, and actually maybe going back to this, all my sampling and collages is actually very embedded and tied up with computer design in a way, because with the computer, like and especially with the coming of internet and this proliferation of imagery and the access to it suddenly became like, you know, you when you were doing a collage, like, you know, back then, you had to like buy postcards or newspapers and magazines, and you cut them. So of course you had a lot of images, but it was still reduced. Now, like, if you want to put a horse with a bottle of water with a mid-century table, like it will take you like 30 seconds on Google, and you can choose. And it's a very, very different approach to finding images and mixing images together. And I think from my kind of ease with computer, because I was studying and I kind of liked working with computer, Photoshop became a kind of a normal tool in the process of making paintings. So I was kind of mixing like normal kind of sketching. I have a little sketchbook and I do my little sketches, but often, and especially for the collage works that I was doing, I started to use the computer a lot. An example here is the meteorite portraits. So typically that is, first it's a digital image. I usually take actually one of the portraits that I actually done in the past and I put it on the Photoshop, and then basically I research meteorites on internet, and then I choose, and then I basically crop it or distort it or turn it and change contrast, and then I print that kind of image, and usually I reproduce it on the canvas. That's not the case for every work. For example, the waterfall right here, it's completely not really done with any collages or anything like that. So it really depends, but especially for the portrait that is in the show, I think there's only one that doesn't have this. I guess the black and white one down there don't have that, but most of them have this collages aspects to it, and of course some of them have the collage from the work from the collections that you've seen.
But this 폭포 작품 같은 경우에는 크루베 작품의 폭포에 어느 정도 영향을 받았다고 들었습니다. 네, it's from 크루베 painting, like a little bit of sampling.
Well, that will be more the subject of the waterfall. Like the subject of the waterfall is a kind of a recurrent theme in Western art, but as you're well aware, like in Oriental art a lot, and in Korean art there's a lot of waterfalls as well. And so actually, like how I choose new subject to subject is I like to actually choose subject that have been used and used and used again by many artists and in many kind of different periods. I almost never basically do a subject that is completely new. Yeah. It's often actually like the, let's say portraits, obviously that's been done. So there's absolutely nothing original by doing a portrait or doing a mountain landscapes. Like, and I come from Switzerland, so there's a lot of mountain landscape painters. So I like the idea of actually digging into those subjects because I think if they were painted that many times before and over history for centuries, and actually often throughout different part of the world, that means they basically have kind of an intemporal, like a timeless kind of quality to them. And I love playing with subjects that are completely timeless. It's very easy to contrast that to like something that will be very timely, like a phone. Like if you paint a phone, obviously there was no painting of phone 100 years ago, and there will probably never be a painting of phone in 200 years or 100 years, or maybe much sooner, who knows. But and so actually painters are often attracted to this. And if you look at history of paint, of course there's technological into it sometimes, but it's not, cars, for example, are not super widely painted. Of course there's exceptions, and of course everything is painted, but it's not. But trees, for example, all the time, but everybody all the time, and so that's what I'm also interested into.
그래서 이 작가의 독특한 지점이 있는 것 같아요. 이 작가는 재현의 역사를 다시 재현하고 재해석하는 거거든요. 그래서 그 사실 작품을 이해할 때 그 재현의 역사 속에서, 그게 고대부터 근대든 현대든 그 재현의 역사 속에서 분명히 담고 있던 컨텍스트가 있을 거죠. 근데 그거를 가져다가 다시 재해석하는 과정에서 거기서 레이어들이 쌓이는 거거든요. 그래서 이 전시장에 있는 모든 작품들이 사실은 그 재현의 역사의 레이어를 갖고 있는데, 그것들이 다시 이렇게 이상하게 조합되고 콜라주돼서 다시 만나고 어떤 작업이랑 부딪히고 하면서 또 다른 이야기들을 만들어내는, 그래서 여기 방마다 사실은 팀이 나눠져 있지 않아요. 오히려 그런 새로운 만남을 통해서 어떤 상상을 불러일으키는 방식으로 방이 구성되어 있다고 생각하시면 되고요. 이건 좀 전시 부분으로 갔지만, 그래서 조금 더 전시와 조금 더 연관된 얘기를 해볼게요. 파스텔. 왜냐하면 이 작가한테는 이 파스텔이 재료의 차원을 넘어서 굉장히 더 큰 미닝을 가진 주제적인 차원으로 나가고, 그리고 이 세상을 이해하는 방식의 차원으로도 나가는 그런 특징을 가지고 있다고 생각하는데, 작가님이 파스텔을 만나게 된 게 2013년이에요. 그게 피카소의 그 떼뜨드 팜무, 그 여인 두상을 보고 이제 시작을 했는데, 그 계기와 파스텔화를 그리면서 어떤 부분들을 익히고 또 알게 되었는지, 그런 부분을 좀 얘기해 줬으면 좋겠습니다.
Yes, so pastel is my kind of primary medium for I guess 10 years, a bit more than 10 years. And it was not really the case before at all. I was actually mostly painting with oil on canvas while I was in Glasgow, and I was struggling with one aspect of it is the drying time of oil, which is very slow, and I'm actually very impatient as an artist, and so that was very hard to just wait like a week. Sometimes it's like literally 3 weeks for some colors, and also. What I didn't like about oil, it was that you can always redo your painting. It's like an endless, let's say like you paint this little red and you're like, oh, actually it will be better with this red with a tiny bit of blue in it. So you do the blue, you like recover and it's like, oh, actually that was better before, but each time you have to wait a week. And the composition's similar, like you do the pot there and you're like, oh, actually 5 centimeters or 5 millimeters on the side, that will be better. And anyway, I was like spending a year or 2 years to finish a painting, and the painting was not even that great. So I was like, this is a little. So anyway, like I saw that Tête de Femme of Picasso, and the only thing that I dislike about this anecdote is like this. I'd love to not have Picasso in every talk that I do, but even because he's a little bit of taking too much space in art history. But it is the truth, and I guess he has probably like. At the moment, probably 50 shows in the world, so he's like omnipresent all the time. And I love that piece, obviously. And so I saw that piece in this show in Basel that was actually entitled "The Picasso Are Here," to show the history of how many Picasso were bought in Basel. And this one was actually owned by the Bayer Foundation. And still is, obviously. Anyway, like I saw it and it kind of struck me for various reasons, but I was like, I want to do exactly that. So I bought the postcards and I went to the art store the next day and I bought some pastels and some paper and I started to copy that portraits, and it didn't look very much like the the portrait actually. The first one I started to put makeup on it, and I learned later on why I guess it was kind of embedded in the medium. But from really that first portrait that summer that I did at actually my dad's house in Switzerland, I was on a holiday there. It really kind of like was love at first strike. I really loved the feeling of playing with this powder, this pigment. It was volatile and sensual, and that's why I mentioned the oil. And it was fast. It was extremely fast, and you couldn't redo it. You can do layered on pastel. After like a few layers, you can really erase. It's like you have to. It's like watercolors. Or ink actually, like in those Korean painting that we have here. You can't just redo it. If it's not good, well, you have to do another one. And I really loved that aspect of pastel. So I did like portraits during that summer, and then I started to expand to more my little pots. And I think then over a year or two, I started to like realize that I was only doing pastel. And the first thing that I realized that was that I was looking for friends that was using pastel really mainly to learn the techniques, because I was trying to expand on a bigger scale, and I was trying to find how to prepare a canvas or find basically like a material that I can paint on, and I was not finding anybody doing pastels around me. Everybody was doing oil and acrylic. That's by far the main medium for painters. And so that kind of started to kind of make me go deeper into the history of pastel and seeing like it was a very, very underused medium in modern arts. It's almost non-existent. Everybody's always mentioning Degas, and you know, like this little moment where there's like obviously Degas was using pastels a little bit, but Degas his production is, you know, mainly actually oil. And there's like he did obviously some pastels, and they're really wonderful. Odilon Rodon did some pastels, but then basically there's only a period of 60 years that pastel is a really booming and very popular medium. It's the 18th century in Europe and the Rococo period. And that is and it's really the key figure is this artist called Rosalba Carriera from Venice. That was kind of the early kind of 18th century artist, and she was actually doing miniature, which was very common for women to do, and she had like kind of a workshop with her mom and her sisters, and it was like a full woman kind of operation, and suddenly she kind of started to use pastel. And it was, first of all, it was a very smart move because nobody was doing pastel at that point. So she, as a woman, she had a lot of space to grow in Venice, which was, it's not then the golden age, it was actually before the golden age of Venice, but it's still like a booming commercial art scene at that point. And she grows like extremely fast with that, and people start to come from all over the world to buy her pastels, but also everywhere in Europe, people start to do pastels. In France a lot, and then there's like other bigger figures, and what's happening is that because it sticks, you know, you can buy them in a store. It becomes a very popular medium for women that don't really have access to a big studio. You know, we have to imagine oil painting before tube. It's a little bit of an operation to practice, basically. Like you need to have a studio, you need to learn at the academy, you have to do the pigment, you have to have assistants. You can't just do it like now. But pastel, on the other hand, you can totally just buy them and go, you know, and make them at home. So basically it allowed women to start to really produce arts in a pretty kind of extensive manners. And it's probably the moment that is probably the most women artists up now. Obviously it's probably like also a lot, but at that point there's actually a lot of professional women artists, and we often say that Rosalba Carriera, her estate, her valuation when she died was like 5 times larger than Canaletto, the famous Venetian painter that was doing those endless views of Venice. So she was basically like more successful, you know, financially, and the collectors were buying her work, and we basically forget that there was no women artists. It's that history keep erasing them at different time. And this particular time is the French Revolution, where the French Revolution is an important, obviously, moment in Europe, but also culturally it's a very, very, we can find it's a very masculine, actually not very progressive moment in terms of values, artistic. And, you know, it's compare David to Fragonard, like it's very like David is the kind of, you know, icon of French Revolution, and all this Rococo is really seen as a very like superficial, but also they hate this idea of gender fluidity that is very Rococo. If you think about Boucher and all those kind of aesthetic, that is actually very subversive at that time, and that's why the establishment hates it. But and still to this day, if you say, "Oh, I love Boucher or Rococo," a lot of people will say, "Like what? This is like really not serious. This is like terrible. It's like basically because it is like a little woman thing with flowers," and but actually there was like a much more subversive and interesting. But all this aesthetic, it's a long answer, I know. It's all this aesthetic will be all this aesthetic will be kind of killed at the French Revolution, among other things. I'm not a royalist, but and then and it will basically never come back.
Yeah.
That was my long answer, but.
하지만 이 역사를 이해하는 게 이 여성성 혹은 이런 센슈얼리티에 대한 그런 특징 때문에 파스텔이 미술사에서 사라졌어요. 그리고 소외됐고. 근데 그거를 이 파티, 니콜라스 파티라는 작가가 아무도 지금 동시대에서는 파스텔을 안 하고 있거든요. 근데 그걸 가져다가 완전히 메인 주재료로 사용을 하고 있는 거죠. 근데 사실 작품들을 보면 이게 파스텔인가 싶어요. 사실 굉장히 파스텔의 가능성을 끝까지, 심지어 벽화의 차원으로까지 확대를 해서 보여주거든요. 근데 이 파스텔로 뭔가 더 주제적인 걸 얘기한다고 제가 말씀드리는 이유는 작가가 마스크 오브 더스트라는 얘기를 해요. 먼지 가면. 왜냐하면 파스텔을 작가는 먼지와 같은 거라고 얘기하고 나는 먼지로 그림을 그린다. I paint with dust라고 하는데 그거가 가진 의미가 굉장히 저는 남다르다고 생각을 해요. 그리고 이게 파스텔이 가지는 굉장히 특징 중에 일시적이고 훅 불면 그냥 날아가거든요. 솔직히 말씀드려서 이거 말씀드리기 싫지만 사실 벽화에 가서 훅 불면 날아갑니다. 그냥 정말 처리 안 한 정말 이페메랄한 일시적인 예, 재료예요. 그래서 그걸 가지고 재현을 하고 회화를 그린다는 것의 의미에 대해서 이거를 먼지 가면이라고 표현을 했는데 그 먼지 가면을 얘기할 때 또 화장을 얘기했거든요. 근데 그게 로코코 시대에 흥미롭게도 파스텔 샵과 화장품 샵이 같았어요. 그래서 실질적으로 화장품과 파스텔이 그림 재료가 같았던 거죠. 그래서 파스텔을 얼굴에 바르면 화장이 되는 거고 그걸 그림을 그리면 그림이 되는 그런 상황이었거든요. 그래서 마치 화장을 하듯 나는 환영을 만든다라고 얘기를 해요. 그래서 그 부분에 대해서 좀 얘기를 해주셨으면 좋겠어요. 근데 그게 단순히 이 작가가 본인의 그 초상에 대해서 얘기할 때 그런 표현을 썼지만 본질이 없이 화장으로만 이루어진 가면을 만드는 거야 나는. 그거는 회화는 재현이니까 일루전을 만드는 거야 라고 했는데 그게 비단 초상에 대한 얘기만이 아니라 그의 풍경이나 그런 정물도 사실 그런 전통 장르의 익숙함의 가면을 만드는 거라고 저는 생각을 하거든요. 그래서 그 부분에 대해서 작가님의 생각을 좀 들어보고 싶습니다.
Yes, so that's as you mentioned this kind of correlation with the medium of pastel and the makeup in the Rococo time that I didn't know at all when I started to do my portrait. And as I mentioned, my first portrait, the first thing that I did was to put makeup on them, and it's really like only a year and a half later that much later that I discovered that, and I was kind of mesmerized by that fact, and I was like, oh, this is the first thing that I did using the medium, is to have this connection with makeup, and I was very fascinated about that, and how the Rococo periods, if you think about, the people have a lot of powder and makeup on and wigs, and it's true when you will paint. If you sit always in front of you, you will literally paint a painted person already, and so the resemblance between the pastel, the texture of the portraits, and the actual how people looked will be in certain obviously circles will have been something very interesting, and I think the idea of the dust and the mask has been like really something that I've been exploring into my work with the portrait, but with other kind of aspect of my practice, and I think it's one of the theme there is the idea of the perfect face, or the kind of that's human cultures has been always chasing, is the kind of aging face, this kind of ideal beauty that actually doesn't, sometimes people say, oh, it's been changing a lot. Actually, not really. If you see, for example, in Western tradition, the Greek sculptures in the face, and even the body, to be honest, it's really more or less exactly how people want to be kind of depicted right now in the West. So it is kind of when I was looking and actually going just really like Picasso at that point when he did this portraits, he was actually looking at the Greek sculptures. Is this period after the Cubism, and he's like suddenly doing those kind of Botero-esque, like kind of influenced by Greek sculpture. So I think one of the things that I saw in that portrait was actually the Greek sculpture, and this kind of fascination for this perfect mask, in a way, this perfect face. And it's only, you know, basically faces in Greek time look more or less the same. There's this ideal face, and they don't really represent anybody particular. And the Roman really break that tradition and start to depict the actual people. And I really kind of love that kind of breaking point. And I think what I was trying to do as a joining thing is like the Greek kind of ideal face and the new ideal digital face that we've been, you know, that has been seeing as a person growing up in the kind of, you know, 80s and 90s, and now like and being more and more kind of exposed to half real, half digital faces. And of course, as we are all well aware, like probably half or whatever the percentage of what we're going to see as human in movies, in magazines, in advertisements, and maybe in reality will be completely digital and completely kind of codes in a way. And I think when I do the portrait, I'm trying to basically have like I'm trying to have those digital presence as my sitter, and trying to kind of have a conversation with those kind of, you know, spirits or ghosts or of that kind of you know, digital you know, like fantasy worlds that all human cultures are in, and to see what can transpire from them.
디지털 그 트랜스포메이션이라는데 필터, 저희 디지털 필터 많이 쓰죠. 뽀샵. 그래서 그걸로 자기의 본 모습을 가리고 그 아이디얼화된, 그러니까 이상화된 그런 모습을 드러내는 것과 지금 파스텔로 만드는 화장 같은 환영과 이렇게 연결시키는 굉장히 동시대적인 특징이 있는 거고요. 저는 좀 거기서 더 나가서 어떤 생각까지 했냐면, 파스텔이 가루잖아요. 그게 약간 물질적으로는 가루인데 스크린 화면에서는 픽셀과 같은 거라고 생각을 하거든요. 그래서 픽셀을 이렇게 조정한다 그랬다니까요. 위치를 이렇게 재구성하는 방식으로 스킨이나 리스킨 기술이 만들어진다고 해요. 그러니까 뭐 어떤 게임에서 뭐 캐릭터의 옷을 바꾸거나 얼굴을 바꾸고 뭐 가발을 씌우고 막 이런 것들이 스킨 리스킨 같은 게 이렇게 픽셀을 재조정하는 건데, 저한테는 이렇게 손가락으로 파스텔로 이렇게 문지르는 게 약간 그런 느낌이 들 정도로, 그러니까 파스텔이 가지고 있는 굉장히 역사적인 특징에서 지금 우리가 얘기하는 그런 디지털 시대의 특징까지도 아우르는 걸 좀 가지고 있는 그런 환영 에 대해서 얘기하는, 그래서 미술사를 아주 처음부터, 심지어 밑에 있는 동굴 같은 경우에는 동굴 벽화서부터 시작하는 건데, 그 정도의 오래된 시간부터 지금 아주 동시대적인 것까지 커버하고 있는 의미를 가진 파스텔이라고 보시면 되고요. 여기서 우리는 이제 또 중요하게 짚고 넘어가야 되는 게 지금 전시 중에만 보여지는 파스텔 벽화예요. 이 벽화를 위해서 작가가 정말 한 달 정도 있었는데, 저희가 이 벽화가 사실 가루가 너무 날리거든요. 그래서 필터 있는 마스크를 안 끼면 이분은 살아남지 못할 거예요. 그래서 그 벽화를 위해서 다 챔버라고 하는 거의 그린하우스 같은 그 비닐막을 다 치고, 그리고 그 안에서 전신 수트를 입고 필터 마스크를 끼고 들어 앉아서 그거를 그리면, 그걸 옆에서 보면 파스텔을 이렇게 칠하는, 그러니까 잘 부러지기도 하지만 파스텔을 칠하는 그 즉시 한 3분의 1은 떨어지는 것 같아요, 밑으로. 그래서 정말 뽀얗게 다 쌓이거든요. 그래서 저는 거기에 들어가면 온몸이 근지럽더라고요. 그래서 정말, 그런데 그거를 그렇게 작업하는 게 너무 신기할 정도로, 그렇게 해서 만들어진 거대한 크기의 벽화가, 여기는 저희가 호암미술관이 층고가 좀 낮아서 이 정도지만 다른 미술관 더 높은 것도 거의 건물 벽을 다 채울 정도로 정말 엄청난 크기의 파스텔 벽화를 합니다. 그리고 나서 이거 절대 판넬 위에 그리는 거 아니고요. 미술관 옹벽에 그리는 거예요. 그래서 이거 전시 끝나면 사라질 예정이고요. 저희가 안타깝게도 사포로 지워야 되는데 막 이 미술관에선 난리가 났어요. 뭐 이 앞에다 벽을 하나를 세워서 감춰야 된다느니 뭐 이런 얘기를 할 정도로. 근데 이 작가한테는 이 파스텔 벽화가 가지고 있는 이 사라짐의 운명, 일시성, 이 굉장히 큰 의미이기도 하거든요. 귀히 보관해야 되는 회화 그러면 오리지널리티 해서 막 귀하고 막 이렇게 여겨왔잖아요. 근데 이게 결국 사라질 걸 엄청난 시간과 노력을 들여서 만드는 이게 사실 이 전시 주제인 더스트와도 굉장히 많이 연관이 되어 있거든요. Yeah. Tell me more about your mural, you know.
Yes, exactly. I mean, as you pointed out, all those murals have only a kind of a short existence, like maybe the existence of we were talking about the little what's the bug that does the sounds everywhere, the cicadas. Yeah, I think they have the same lifespan than the mural.
Okay.
I think it's 3-4 months. Yeah, they come, they're having a big party, and then they just die. So it's maybe this 4 months for them, it's a lifetime. so it's about all different perspective, I guess, of time. But yeah, like I do really love the idea that to create arts or objects that are disappearing. It's kind of important for me because of course, when you're an artist, you go to museums and you have a fascination for this obsession for human cultures to preserve, those objects from the past, and but also it gives you a little bit of pressure because, and especially like in the last probably like century, like the amount of kind of conservation that is involved in objects, how like well kept with temperature and like control and. Like museums, and it becomes like an obsession for different cultures and countries to preserve the past, as much as possible. So I think when you're an artist, you also have been told like, oh, you need to use this because it needs to stay forever, and then it starts to be a little bit like haunting because you're like, oh, maybe what I did like last year is terrible, so maybe I wanted to destroy it. And of course you can't. I mean, it's not yours anymore. So it's kind of a relief actually for me to create works that I know I just exist in this world for a small amount of time. It also allowed me to create work sometimes a bit different. Like some of time I reproduce another artwork on the wall, and I will probably not do that on the canvas. So it's kind of give me a little bit more flexibility, but also I think it goes, like this idea of ephemeral goes very well with a lot of the different subjects that I've been exploring, and I think typically in this show this is very present. The idea of the time that passes and how different moment in human kind of cultures and in history, like I've been dealing with this idea of ephemerality but immortality in a lot of the work that from the kind of traditional collection, the dinosaurs here, there's the little picture of the baby, so there's a lot of those themes that I think the fact that the wall is ephemeral and is made out of dust bring all that together in a very kind of direct way, because suddenly because it's interestingly enough, it's one of the things that people always come up with, like, oh, that's going to disappear, and people are always kind of shocked by it, because I guess people are so used to the idea that if you create art, it's it needs to keep it, but like it's interesting that we don't apply that to anything else that humans are creating. Like literally, like in the last century, like we expanded this gigantic production of objects that the kind of program obsolescence of technology that basically like it is literally designed so it doesn't last more than a few years, so you can as a capitalist kind of speed up running machine. Like it's a terrible idea in a commercial way to design something that you can keep. If you buy your phone and it's going to work for 100 years, or even back in the days, furniture were like giving to you children, and even you like watches in theory, like so you buy one and it's for 3 generations. Tell that to any like commercial people, they were like, this is a terrible idea. This is like make something that's gonna break in 2 months.
핸드폰은 2년마다 바꾸는 걸로. 그 사실은 그런 벽화의 일시성에도 뭐 어떤 그걸로 의미를 가지고, 사실 태어난 모든 거는 사라지잖아요. 근데 그 사라지는 기간이 다를 뿐이고 하루살이는 뭐 하루 있다 사라지고 인간은 이제는 한 100년 정도 되죠. 100년 있다 사라지고 뭐 돌조각도 점점 마모되고 뭐 사실 얘 금색이었거든요. 금색이 이렇게 되기도 하고 다 변하고 사라지는데 그런 주제를 다루는 데 있어서 파스텔 벽화처럼 뭔가 의미를 더 증폭시킬 수 있는 게 없었다는 생각이 들어서 사실은 이번 전시 제목을 더스트로 하자고 하면서도 굉장히 좋은 생각이라고 다들 같이 얘기를 했던 이유가 거기에 있었습니다. 그리고 사실 근데 또 아이러니하게 벽화는 사라질 건데 세상 여기 있는 이 액자로 된 작품들은 너무너무 귀하게 이제 대해지고 그리고 심지어 작가가 그 미술사 속에서 그 금박이 시작된 게 이제 이집트 시대라고 하는데 고대 이집트라고 하는데 금박으로 곱게 다 붙이고 나무도 너무 좋은 거 쓰고 그리고 굉장히 귀히 여겨지는 작품이 되었거든요. 그리고 이건 사라지고 그 대조라 그럴까요? 거기서 오는 아이러니가 지금 저는 회화라는 매체가 가지고 있는 아이러니라고 생각을 하는데 회화가 이미 죽었다고들 다들 얘기했다가 다시 부활해갖고 이런 영화를 누리고 있는 이 상황에서 이 사라짐의 운명을 지닌 벽화랑 귀히 여겨지는 액자 작업이랑 이 아이러니가 사실은 우리 인간 모습이랑 너무 닮았다고 생각을 하는 거예요. 사라질 거 알면서 그리고 심지어 종의 멸종의 위기에 대해서 막 얘기를 하면서 인간종의 위기에 대해서 막 얘기하면서 그래도 계속 물질적인 거 찾고 계속 발전하려고 하고 계속 이렇게 뭐라 그럴까요? 지속, 서스테이너빌리티에 대해서 열망하는 오래 살려고 하고 영생을 얻으려고 하고 아마 나중에는 누군가는 영생을 살고 있겠죠. 옆에 걸어다니는 사람 중에 뭐 그러는 것과 굉장히 뭔가 아이러니하게 유사하다는 생각을 했어요. 작가님한테 벽화와 이 그냥 액자화된 페인팅과의 무슨 차이가 있나요? 그 점이 좀 궁금했던 지점이기도 합니다. 네.
Yeah, I mean, as we mentioned a few times, like the mural disappear and the painting stays, and yeah, like they have to be framed because they're fragile. So like every pastels, and it was the same in the past, they had to be framed, and actually like back then the transportation and quality of glass and crates were very different. So there was a lot of them obviously disappeared because they will break. Nowadays it's a little bit better, but it's true. Like there's an interesting. I think you mentioned that a contrast between those work that are fairly fragile and subtle, and those pretty heavy frame the work, and it took me kind of. I mean, now I'm used to it, but it is kind of, it always like, wow, does those objects look so heavy and have this like really kind of like, yeah, precious kind of looking thing. And I do like this contrast between the two, and also because of the presence of the mural, you can really see like the kind of naked kind of quality of the pastel, and then those are more kind of, yeah, in the kind of coffin, I guess, sarcophagus kind of pastel. I mean, I use actually like the gold leaf more for, like in the last decades, people started to frame everything in white and also paint everything in white, which, for a very small amount of things was a good idea, but it's a terrible idea for 95% of objects, because the color white is actually not a great color that goes with other color. It's a strange cultural misunderstanding of color that people have been having now for a little too long, but it will probably disappear at some point. But this idea of this color being neutral and so on, it's been like kind of a little bit of a disaster for a lot of I think perceptions of paintings. So the gold on the frame was often used to basically also create like a very clear barrier between the painting and the wall, but also the gold actually reflects the colors of the room, and it's much more alive in terms. It acts as a subtle mirror. if you do a white frame on any kind of paintings, and actually there's one here with a white frame that is a white background, you can really see the difference. It's basically create a very harsh kind of barrier and a contrast with the colors. I always mention that, like where we have too bright light here, you know, and you look at it and I look you in the same time, you'll see that it's not good for, you know, the colors and the perception everywhere. It's what the color white is obviously a very kind of basically rejects all the lights. It kind of bounces compared to like dark colors. So basically, like it eats up the colors around it in a way, like for your eyes. So often, I mean, of course, it works sometimes, but rarely. Like it's like any other colors. And I think that's. I mentioned, I don't think it's exactly your question, but I go there anyway. That I love the idea. Like I find it very interesting that if I ask my artist friends or gallerists or museums, like, oh, so which color did you paint in the wall for your show? Most of the time they will say like, oh, I didn't. There's no color. I didn't paint it, or like we didn't. There's no color. It's white. And I was like, what do you mean white is a color? It's like any other color. Like not white is not They're confused with lights, like pure light. Yeah, sure, that's or pure dark. The absence of light is kind of called black, but any black is also a color, and I think that's kind of an interesting kind of aspect of this. And so, yeah, again, I was thinking I was going, but the idea was to answer about the gold frame. But the idea of the gold is, of course, there's a connection with what gold kind of has as a cultural significance, but also it's really the quality of what the reflection does to an object, and I think it's been used a lot for that reason, and still to this day it's used for that reason. And it's true that it's very interesting that this pole here was like fully golden, and now like it is obviously this beautiful green patina. So age makes things also beautiful.
사실 이 파스텔 얘기를 길게 하고 이렇게 이 특성을 주제적인 거로 확장하는 방식에 대해서 이해를 한 게 사실 전시를 얘기하기 위한 근간이 됐고요. 사실 전시 얘기하는데 많이 돌아오긴 했습니다. 그런데 사실 이 파스텔이 가지고 있는 일시적인 이런 특징, 이페메랄한 특징, 너무도 연약한 특징을 약간 인간이나 비인간 종이나 아니면 문명이나 자연의 지속 아니면 소멸에 대한 차원으로 확장을 해서 생각해보는 그런 전시가 이번 전시인데, 이거를 사실은 뭔가 교조적으로 뭔가 메시지를 전하려고 한다기보다 저희가 사라짐에 대해서 생각하는 방식, 유지에 대해서 생각하는 방식을 굉장히 때로는 진지하지만 때로는 되게 이렇게 뒤통수 맞은 것 같이 굉장히 유쾌하게 유머러스하게 우리의 과거와 인간의 과거와 현재와 미래에 대해서 이렇게 상상해 볼 수 있는 그런 전시가 되길 바라는 마음에서 이제 만들었는데요. 이거를 위해서 특별히 작가가 이제 저희의 고미술 컬렉션을 활용을 해서 이 전시를 만들었습니다. 근데 리움의 고미술 컬렉션을 그냥 저희 미술관에서만 이렇게를 하는 게 아니라, 아까도 말씀드렸듯이 미술사를 워낙 탐구하는 작가다 보니 다른 소장품이 있는 미술관에 가서 전시를 할 때는 그 이전 과거에도 그 미술관의 소장품을 연구하고 참조하고 샘플링해서 전시를 새롭게 만드는 이런 식으로 작품을 해왔던 분이고, 그게 너무 저희 미술관과 딱 맞아 떨어졌고, 그리고 특히 아시다시피 저희는 고미술과 현대미술을 다 가지고 있는 미술관이잖아요. 그리고 작가가 워낙 고미술에 대해서 관심이 많았기 때문에 작년에 이제 한국에 와서 저희 고미술들을 실견을 하고 같이 그때부터 얘기를 해서 셀렉션을 하고 이런 식으로 진행을 했습니다. 그래서 사실 제가 여쭤보고 싶은 게 이렇게 그거를 고르고 대화하고 이런 과정에서 그 이전에 다른 전시와 좀 다른 지점이 있었다거나 어떤 지점에서 더 좋았다거나 이런 거를 좀 얘기를 해주시면 좋겠습니다.
Yeah, so this about the process of choosing the element of the collection. I think the main point there was that I didn't know much about Korean kind of antiquities and and art and art history. So the main point here was a learning process and trying to kind of see trying to deal in a similar time, like choosing objects without knowing anything about them, but just like with my reading of visual language, which is in a way an universal, timeless language, but also trying to learn about the context of such objects. But I was also aware that I'm actually, when I work with Western arts, I'm actually really not at all like experts, and I don't spend much of my time just like reading extensively about a period of time or an artist. Like I mostly kind of spend time actually like looking, like painting and reading a bit, but not like I will never say like, oh, I'm an expert on. So I'm also aware that I will not become like an expert of Korean ceramic. You know, that will take obviously a long time, and that's kind of. I was aware that it's like that's actually a quality for a show like that, because you can basically bring a new angle and like highlight those objects in a different way, and then people can just take whatever they want for the duration of the show. Those, you know, this object here it is, you know, from the kind of 13th century. Obviously, has been in many places, changed a lot, and that was interesting because like some people ask me, so what do you, how we see this object is like kind of very unusual, and it's like maybe the way that, you know, we usually see kind of you know, antiquities with this, you know, context of, but I was like also remember that, you know, the context of antiquities now, for example, at the Louvre Museum is also very, very, very particular. It's in an extremely modern, you know, kind of environment, and most of the object was never supposed to be displayed like that, obviously. So the context of this object, probably for, you know, almost like 1,000 years, has been probably like displayed, hidden in many, many, many ways, and it will be hopefully again for the next hundreds of years displayed in different ways, different contexts, different perceptions. And what I truly love about it is that this, to almost imagine this person as a character that has been through, that is much more immortal than humans, and that basically as a sponge takes all of that, you know, decades after decades, centuries after centuries, to tell us about all those different places and, you know, time that this object has been through. Now he is with us for around my work for a few months, but then he will go back to Lium. But also at some point Lium will not exist, you know, but probably the subject will. Oh, what did I say? And that's kind of what is kind of fascinating about some of those kind of objects in the collection. It's because some of them are like this one, very old, and I love the idea that they really kind of travel through time in a very kind of effortless way in many ways. And I think they really allowed us to connect and have conversations with the human from the past and the value from the past. And I think often what art does actually is to make us aware that actually the past was not that different, and humans actually don't change that much, because technology changed a lot, but art actually doesn't change at all. It's like sometimes we feel like, oh, art is the avant-garde, it's like really the advance of, but actually if you look at Western paintings, or even from, like literally there's almost never anything changing. The subjects are more or less the same, the obsessions for exactly like death, life, violence, love, passion is there all the time. So it's actually there to remind us that we have strong connections from human of the past and the future. And I think we always feel anxious about, oh my God, the world is changing around us, because mainly, you know, technology and new things, but actually we don't change at all, and for good and terrible reasons, because we obviously do the great things that we do all the time, but also we seem to constantly repeat the terrible things that humans do to each other.
사실 그렇게 고미술, 한국 고미술을 전시에 어떤 서양 작가가 한국 고미술을 차용하는 데 있어서 어떤 분들은 굉장히 이게 너무 가볍게 다뤄지는 게 아닌가? 아니면 다른 문화를 얼마나 이해하고 있는가? 이런 거에 대한 의구심이 들 수 있지만 작가가 얘기한 것처럼 사실은 저희가 고미술을 전시하는 방법이 원래 그 작품이 존재했던 방식과 다르거든요. 심지어 미술관에 있을 때도요. 그래서 그 과거의 것들을 어떻게 소환해서 어떻게 조합을 해서 어떤 얘기를 하는지에 대한 거에 더 포커스를 맞추시는 게 사실은 이 전시를 이해하는데 더 좋을 것 같고, 사실 얘는 얘라고 하기에는 국보입니다. 국보가 된 이유는 사실은 원래 그 절들이 다 고려시대 절들이 다 산속에 있었기 때문에 그 산속에서 사람들이 찾아오게 하기 위해서 거의 한 17m 정도 되는 단간이 있었고 그 단간에 깃발이 매달려 있었는데요. 그거의 미니어처를 이렇게 청동으로 만들어서 거기다 금박을 귀히 입혀서 사실 돈이 좀 많으신 귀족분들이 자기 개인 원당에 이제 넣고 보관했던, 그러니까 왕실의 것을 가질 수 없으니 미니어처로 만들어서 보관하고, 근데 이게 국보가 된 이유는 머리에 용이 붙어 있는 게 단간들은 다 지금 남아 있는 게 없어요. 근데 얘만 이제 머리에 용이 있어서 남아 있는데 이 금동 용두보당이 이렇게 갑자기 파스텔 산 풍경 앞으로 와서 무슨 동화와 같이 막 산 위에서 이렇게 날아갈 것 같은 그런 모습으로 이렇게 있는 것 자체가 정말 많은 얘기를 저는 끌어낼 수 있다고 생각하고, 그리고 심지어 옆방에 있는 공룡은 사라진 종인데 그 공룡이 사라진 이유가 사실은 옛날 사람들은, 진화론적인 사람들은 진화론을 믿는 사람들은 우성과 열성 중에 열성이고 크고 우둔하고 사납고 부족했기 때문에 이 진화의 과정에서 사라졌다, 이렇게 얘기를 해왔지만, 인간 중심적인 사고에서. 근데 사실 굉장히 우연적인 우주의 우연에 의해서 저기 운석 여인이 있는데요, 운석이 떨어져서 사실 사라진 종이죠. 그러니까 인간 이외의 다른 종의 멸종과 그리고 귀한 생명의 탄생과 이런 것까지를 아우르는 그런 여러 가지 작품들을 여기서 만날 수 있고, 저희가 시간이 좀 부족해서 가장 중요한 작품을 또 말씀을 드릴 텐데요. Yeah, as imagined. 사실은 이 전시에서 굉장히 중점이 되는 작품이 저희 소장품 중에 십장생도 10곡병과 군선도를 사실 작가가 샘플링을 하고 연구를 해서 8점의 아치 신작, 초상 신작을 만들었어요. 작가는 이걸 상상의 8선, 상상의 신선들이라고 얘기를 하는데요. 보면 사실 거기서 샘플링한 것들이 정확하게 그 8선들의 경무를 이렇게 다 한 게 아니고 굉장히 크리에이티브하고 유머러스한 방식으로 샘플링을 하고 있는 걸 이제 공간 곳곳에서 발견을 할 수 있습니다. 그 작업에 조금 그 배경을 설명을 드리면, 그 십장생도는 장생을 염원하는 인간의 바람이 거기 막 잔뜩 녹아져 있는 막 10개 상징들이 있는 그런 페인팅이고, 군선도는 죽지 않고 살아서 신선으로 살아서 끝까지 영생을 누리고자 하는 그 바람을 담은 이제 그림인데, 거기서 이제 모티브를 딴 거예요. 그 작업을 하면서 어떤 점이 재밌었고 어떤 느낌이었는지에 대해서 좀 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
Yeah, that was like a very exciting series of portraits that I wanted to do for the show, and loosely based on the Chinese myth of the 8 immortals that was been also very painted and used in Korea, and also the beautiful paintings of the longevity symbols. That is also like there's a lot of quite examples in Korea still to this date, and I think. Again, with my technique or idea of sampling and collages, I thought I will want to create, like, basically the 8 immortals have attributes. Each of them has like more or less an attribute. This riding the donkey like on and it really reminded me the obviously the attributes of the Renaissance saints, which, you know, like if you go to any like big Western arts museums, and basically you have like a set of like, I don't know, 20 characters. It's very small, and they constantly come, you know, like Saint Catherine with the wheel. You know, there's all those like characters that have there, and basically to recognize them, you see the little attributes, and they tell us. And I was like also thinking about how interesting this constant is in human cultures to have those superheroes, basically, that's, you know, don't change, because now it's the same with the superheroes. They have their little helmet, their little bat thing, and it's, you know, like in the last like 30 years, they do like a movie every 6 months about the same heroes. So there's almost like a repeat. And so I wanted to create my own little 8 immortals, but also I was aware that I didn't want to do like this kind of cultural sampling or appropriation, so I was very kind of loosely based on either very direct collage, but with a lot of humor and almost like irreverence for this, and especially I think with the Immortals painting, I took just the dog that is not really like a symbol by itself in the painting with the characters, but I think has a lot of movement, a lot of humor. And we were like recalling like the Giacomo Balla, like futuristic kind of this running dog. But suddenly I used it for the ponytail of that character, and I just used one of the immortal kind of dress in this like very ink, and it made up this like funny kind of characters that somehow like connects to the painting with a lot of humor. But also I wanted to highlight the fact that this painting has a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of movement. There's a lot of, I think, jokes around everywhere. Very often. Painters have humor. You know, not everybody is Caravaggio, and I think this, you know, this painting especially like showcase that for sure. But then, yeah, it was really kind of a really fun and great experience to just sample from those different kind of paintings. But I didn't, for the donkey, for example, I took the donkey from Goya's, so there was like suddenly a different kind of entry points as this artist that maybe doesn't have the most, I guess he has a lot of humor, but it's very dark. But it brings, I think, if you think about Goya, you straight think about the, you know, the series of war that he did, and this kind of thing that he witnessed during his lifetime. So I think it was also connecting to different theme of the show. There's also the big ruin kind of paintings. So there was, when I do all this sampling, I'm trying to like make all those connections in my head. But of course, when you visit the show, I really don't expect everybody to do the same connection that I do. But it's true that, as you mentioned, this portrait is with a meteorite, and then you have the dinosaurs. But the meteorites, I think, for me, recall very strongly the you know, scholar stones, this kind of tradition in Asia and especially in China. But I think like, anyway, the waterfall, recall that. So there's like all those connections that hopefully people can do or not. But I'm trying to have a lot of layers, because it's what I love when I see art, is to kind of lose myself almost in all those different layers and references. But also I believe that if you don't want to, you can have only one layer, and that's totally fine.
사실 모든 이런 흥미로운 조합들에 대해서 다 짚고 넘어가고 싶긴 하지만 시간적으로는 그렇게는 못하겠고, 예를 들면 밑에 있는 거는, 밑에 요 바로 아래층에는 이제 동굴 벽화랑 백자 태호가 같이 놓여져 있고요. 그러니까 생명의 시작을 상징하는, 그리고 심지어 예술의 시작을 상징하는 그런 식으로 조합이 돼 있고, 또 저쪽 그 옆방으로 가면 붉은 나무 기둥하고 이제 몸이 버섯으로 변해버린 어떤 여인이 이렇게 굉장히 뭔가 심각한 표정으로 이렇게 있는데, 사실 고스트리하게 귀신 같기도 하고요. 근데 막 나무는 다 핏빛인데 뭐 약간 거기서 이렇게 살아남은 인간 변종 같다고 해야 될까요? 그런 모습이기도 하고, 그 다음에 또 그 가운데 방이 핑크 방에는 예를 들면 여기 말고 그 다음에 밑에 층에는 뭐 크리즈라고 굉장히 삶과 죽음의 경계에 있는 이렇게 내장같이 생기고 구불구불한 그런 작가의 주름 연작이랑 뭐 정선에 이렇게 구불구불한 노백도와 같이 이렇게 섞여 있기도 하고 이런 굉장히 흥미로운 조합들이 많이 있어요. 그래서 사실 그런 거를 보면서 저는 이렇게 관람객들한테 좀 더 이렇게 추천하고 싶은 방식은 여기 사실 여기 폭포도 있고 십장생도도 보면 막 폭포가 있고 막 선셋 선라이즈 이런 일출일몰 이런 작가의 작품이 있고 그다음에 또 십장생도 가면 또 해가 그려져 있고 이런 약간 숨은 그림 찾기 하듯이 사실 서양의 재현의 역사 속에서 만들어진 이런 심볼들 상징들이 사실은 동양에서도 많이 사용됐었고 그게 어떤 방식으로 믹스가 돼 있는지 작가가 마치 그 군선도랑 뭐라 그럴까요? 그 십장생도에서 샘플링을 할 때 유머와 상상을 많이 섞었던 것처럼 그렇게 다양한 방식으로 이 전시를 이해를 하시면 좋겠다는 그런 생각을 했어요. 그래서 사실은 제가 작가와도 고민에 대해서 얘기를 바가 어떤 페인터가 어떤 주제를 전달함에 있어서 이건 이거야 라고 말하는 것처럼 재미없는 일이 없거든요. 그래서 사실은 이 페인터가 하는 가장 중요한 미덕 중에 하나는 그 페인팅을 보고 정말 많은 사람들이 보는 각기 다른 사람들이 다양한 상상을 일으켜야 하는데 이거는 막 지구 종말에 관한 얘기고 인간 종의 멸종에 대한 얘기고 이런 의미로 이런 전시를 했다기보다 그런 우리가 뭐 기후 위기 때문에 뭐 불타는 산이 있고 뭐 잿빛 구름이 있고 이런 거 같이 보이지만 그런 거로부터 다양한 어떤 그 콜라주라고 작가가 얘기하거든요. 이런 굉장히 다양한 조합들 속에서 많은 상상을 할 수 있는 그런 계기가 됐으면 좋겠습니다. 근데 죄송하지만 한 가지 더 짚고 넘어가도 될까요? 네. 사실은 전시 내용에 대해서 더 많이 얘기를 하고 싶었지만 지금은 주제 표현 방식에 대해서 얘기했고 마지막으로 이 부분은 짚고 넘어가지 않을 수가 없어요. 사실은 이 작가가 공간을 굉장히 몰입적이고 총체적인 무대와 같은 방식으로 만드는 이유 그리고 그거를 하게 함으로써 주는 어떤 건축적인 경험이라든지 이런 부분에 대해서 좀 얘기를 했으면 좋겠습니다. 마지막으로. 그래서 사실은 이 작가가 지금 1층과 2층을 동일하게 나누고 그러니까 방의 구조를 동일하게 나누고 마치 중세 건축의 회랑처럼 이렇게 하고 이제 아치들을 했어요. 그 공간 연출한 방식에 대해서 좀 설명을 해주셨으면 좋겠습니다. 왜 이런 그러니까 당신에게 전시가 어떤 의미인지 그리고 어떤 방식으로 이걸 받아들이기를 원하는지 이런 부분을 좀 얘기해 주셨으면 좋겠습니다.
So yeah, I do, but it's been interesting actually because I've often got these questions, or you designed a space and it's actually very like immersive in a way, and I've been thinking a little bit about that lately, and I've been thinking that everybody does it in a way, like it's because actually think about that in at Lium, you know, the staging is very present, but and the National Gallery also very present, so it's actually very. And I will say, like, you know, the white cube is also a very strong statement for presentation. So I mean, sometimes it's out maybe at like a little bit of laziness. People don't change it, but most artists, like your creators, change the space. So in that, I'm just thinking about that because I don't think it's anything special in a way. It's just like when you do a show, you do. You know, a stage for it, and everybody in a way does it. There's no, I don't think there was any show at Lium that was not designed, you know, with wall and colors and different walls. So it's just maybe I like doing it. That's the only difference. Because sometimes you ask someone else to do the design, and like the artist maybe like is maybe not as closely like interested into it, which is totally fine. So in particular for this, the main thing was the columns. So in that, you know, like you can see like the white things here. So there's like eight columns, very big columns, and I wanted to hide them. So that dictated a lot of the architecture because basically the width of the arch is the width of the columns. and the split of those 3 rooms, it's basically how the columns, which I'm sure you used it in a way probably before. So that's in many ways, often actually the actual space itself will at least dictate half of my decisions in terms of where I put the rooms, if there's columns, if there's like, walls that you can move or not. And I think like I wanted to do a repeat, but also the repeat was obvious because these 2 spaces are actual repeats in reality. Like they're exactly the same space. So I thought like, well, let's just like play what the space actually is. It's 2 exact similar space, and I'm gonna do a repetition and just trying to create a journey that has this idea of the kind of duality and mirroring, and in that regard, I was really a completely last-minute ad, but the 2 stone sculptures really kind of play in that role because there's the those sculptures are often and almost all the time seen as a pair. So they do exist as a pair here, but like they're both on different floors, and also they look at 2 different. One look at the painting and one look at the audience in a way. So that was really kind of playing that idea of the mirroring and the repeat of the 2 floors in those 2 sculptures that are always a pair. And then like the marble kind of arch, which is like very decorative. I always like kind of tease myself because it does look sometimes as a very millennium coffee store or a Prada store. So I said it so you don't have to say it to me in my face afterwards.
The middle is not Middle East, Middle Age.
Yeah, Middle Age is more classy.
motif.
So yeah, but I know it's better. But people say like it also looks like a Prada store. But so I'm aware of it. Yeah, I do like I often mentioned the Saint Marco kind of place in Florence, the Fra Angelico kind of painting there with all the arches. I mean, it's among many examples of basically building in the Renaissance that are built where it's truly actually like the golden age of architecture, sculptures, and painting. Also, like basically designed to a building that has more or less one function, is to elevate it, like the visitors. A church, I mean, it was used in many ways, but it's still like a spiritual place, which is art is in a way. Like the aim is a similar type of experience. So when you have this at that specific time in art history, like literally all the money in the world to build those spaces, to commission the best artists with like endless budgets for architecture, for material. And when you go to Italy, and they were well preserved, thankfully, and not burned during history, you really have this incredible experience of like what happened when you have that, and especially when the space was devoted for a spiritual. I mean, don't give it for a spiritual kind of, even if it was obviously highlighting very much also commerce success and capitalism at that point too. But and so like I was always like fascinated to, in a very small way, recreate this idea of like controlling the entire kind of aspect of a show. But I have to say that it's actually quite simple. I just paint the wall and do an arch, which is not that original, and I just paint like sometimes the full marble. But I think it is interesting. I will mention again and I did that. Like I had that many times in the past. That because in contemporary art shows the walls are so often white. Just painting the wall in color, it makes people already like, whoa, this is like, as every museums that are basically not modern art museums. There's not one museum that have white walls. It's like you almost never see any Renaissance painting or Rococo painting or romantic painting on white wall. It's almost never kind of seen. So it's really like a very obvious thing to do in a way. And it's, but I obviously love doing it and have a lot of fun kind of doing the colors. And I'm also aware that sometimes it doesn't work. We actually changed the color for the last room. And the last day because it was not working, and there's. I never painted. I never did a show where often the walls are painted in advance because obviously you gain time for me to do the mural. And so I almost never did. I think I never did a show where I didn't have to repaint a lot of the wall. Actually, when we did the show at Hauser in LA in 2019, I think I arrived and it was a complete disaster. It was like, it looked terrible. And actually, like, no, my choices. I'm saying it was. I made terrible choices, and people say, "Oh, you must be very good with colors." And I'm actually. I don't think I'm always making. Actually, like, I painted our staircase in our house, and it took like three times, 3 colors to get it right. And it's kind of it's kind of anyway. Like, I love doing it, but I'm aware that is sometimes it's on the curbs of. Working and not working.
Actually, sorry. 사실은 이 컬러를 칠하고 아치를 만드는 거가 간단하다고 얘기를 하지만 사실 이렇게 함으로써 그 아치를 진할 때마다 다른 색깔의 공간을 만나고 다른 공간에서 어떤 콜라주된 다른 작품들을 만나고 또 다른 느낌이고 좀 다른 세계를 만나는 그런 경험들을 계속 하실 거예요. 그래서 제가 이거는 이제 마지막 정리하는 의미에서 그런 공간들에서 작가가 이게 고미술이던 작가의 작품이던 그리고 이게 뭐 해마, 용, 뭐 공룡 아니면 저쪽에 있는 그런 붉은 나무 기둥 아니면 그 잿빛 구름 이런 것들을 이렇게 만나실 때마다 좀